This is episode 59 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and my guest today is making his debut on the podcast. He's the play-by-play voice of the Saskatchewan Rush, as well as a host and producer with 630 Ched and World Hockey Report, Cody Janzen. Cody, how's it going today?
Doing great. What do you say, episode 59? Does that mean this is like was it Travis Moen? Does Roman Josi still wear 59?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. A buddy of mine, Brian Swain, who was with TSN 1260 for a long time and now is with the Edmonton Elks. Whenever I have him on the show, we always try to figure out a player number that matches up when he's been on. So it's kind of interesting you said that.
Well, that's where my mind goes right away. And I do think Josi wears 59, actually. I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the league right now we're rocking it.
And good tie-in with the fact that the Oilers played the Predators last night.
Well, the Preds attempted to play the Oilers, but they can never beat Leon Draisaitl.
That is true. He is the mayor of Nashville. Well, I've been looking forward to having you on the podcast for a while, and I think you're only the second guest I've ever had on with a connection to Saskatoon. So it's cool to chat with someone who spent a bit of time in my hometown as well.
Well, I'm from Warman, if I actually have to get into a little bit more detail here. But yes, I was born in Saskatoon. I don't think Warman had a hospital or even has a hospital. But nope, Saskatchewan guy through and through. Obviously, being in Alberta, working up here, it's a great hockey market. But Sask definitely holds that soft spot in my heart. And I think Saskatoon's one of the more underrated cities in Canada.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think it's one of the hidden gems of Western Canada for sure. My grandma actually lived in Warman for most of her life, and I spent a lot of time out there as a little kid in the 90s, but in the last 25 years, I haven't made as many trips out there. I've played a couple men's league games at the arena out there, but that's about it.
Have you ever played in the old barn there?
No, just the new one that they built.
That's a special one.
I don't know when they built the new one. Sometime I think in the last 10 years or so, and it seems pretty nice out there.
Oh yeah, no, they got a great new barn there. I think they got under 18 AAA team and stuff and everything now, so they could probably have an SJ team if they wanted, but I guess that comes down to fan support.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, being a Sask guy and living in Alberta now, you know all about the harsh winters we have here. But I know that you were actually in California last week as the Rush were playing in San Diego. So are you missing that Southern California weather yet?
I like the warm weather, but I also like winter. I know everyone's going to be like, you're lying, you're full of it. Like, there's nothing more that I enjoy than just going to, clear my mind and going and skating on an outdoor rink, empty outdoor rink, nice -10 weather, no wind, something like that. There's nothing better. So I actually do generally enjoy winter. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, I love it when it's -30 and it's a blizzard outside. Like, no, I don't think anyone enjoys that. But I would miss winter if I had to live down there full time, 1,000%.
Yeah, and Cody, I can tell that you and I are cut from the same cloth because I have that same mentality. I love winter because it's hockey season, and I still get out to the outdoor rink all the time. And growing up here, that was a big part of the winters with buddies, or like you said, skating out there on your own is great too. So I think I would miss living in a place that I didn't have an outdoor rink 5 minutes from my house, wherever and that I could drive to. But at the same time, I love California too, and I could easily spend a couple weeks down there every year.
Oh, a couple weeks without a doubt. But if I had to sit there over summer though, when it's like +40, no thanks. Count me out. I'm not making it through a summer.
I've been. I think I've made 7 trips there in my life, but they've all been sort of either fall or springtime. So you don't get probably as many crowds when you go to places when it's, July or August. And like you said, you don't have to deal with the absolutely scorching heat that they would get at that time.
Definitely. Actually, a funny story about scorching heat. A few years ago, probably before the pandemic, I think 2019 or so, went to Chicago, went to a ball game, +45. We're sitting in Wrigley Stadium melting into the seats. Absolutely miserable. From there on out, I was just like, I'm not made for the heat. Like, I'll take -45 over +45 any day.
I think also because we're accustomed to it. We grew up in it, right?
Fair.
Yeah, and you hear people from California complain about a +7 day in January. That's their winter. So, but before we get into talking about some Oilers talk today, I just wanted to hear a little bit about your broadcasting career with the Rush. So, was calling play-by-play always what you wanted to do in the broadcasting field? And have you always had an interest in lacrosse as well?
In the broadcasting field, 1000%. I mean, have I always wanted to be a play-by-play broadcaster? No, as a kid, I think everyone wants to be the next Gretzky, right? Like that's every Canadian kid's dream. So, I knew I wanted to get into media. I knew I wanted to get into broadcasting. Exactly how, I wasn't quite sure, but once you start to think about it and you think about some of those core memories that you have as kids, it's what did I love? And I loved listening to sports games on the radio. I love watching them on TV, but I also think that there's such a special spot in just those storytellers who can be, accurate play-by-play callers that can really paint that picture for the listener. And so being on that side of the broadcast was always something I really, really wanted to get into. And then, I just didn't grow up with lacrosse as a kid. I grew up south of Swift Current on a farm where no one knew what lacrosse was. I bet you if you went and polled my school of 100 kids back in the day and asked them like what lacrosse was or any simple rules of it, there's probably 1%. And it was probably me, the 1% that actually knew about it. So it was just such a foreign concept back then. But now seeing the game take off and everything, I always loved it. Growing up, I'd watch my cousins play. I had a lacrosse stick. I was always shooting around over summer. I knew the game was something that I was really passionate about. But once you get older, you kind of realize you're like, I want to be in an industry where I love showing up to work. I think that that's kind of what everyone wants. And I mean, just lacrosse was always the goal of mine. It was always something I loved doing, whether it was junior, senior, international, NLL. There's just nothing like calling a lacrosse game. It's the fastest game on 2 feet. And so it was just a no-brainer to step into it.
Well, that's awesome that you had this love for the game going back to when you were a kid. And, even thinking back to when I was in elementary school, I think there was only one kid in my class who played lacrosse. And, we would play it in gym class as part of the curriculum for 2 weeks out of the school year. But other than that, I really didn't know about a lacrosse league in Saskatoon for youth, or just, you'd see highlights on the major sport networks of, the NLL, but it didn't seem like they covered it very extensively. It was a little further down the ticker than, hockey, basketball, baseball, football, and just it really seems to have grown. And now you look at it with how well it's been embraced in Saskatoon. I mean, the Rush, you could speak to this probably better than anyone, the popularity of this team in this city since they came here from Edmonton.
Wow, yeah, the lacrosse has grown huge, and you got to credit the Rush and the Urbans for moving the team from Edmonton to Saskatoon for sure. But now even with the job the Priestners are doing, they continue to grow it. They continue to, when you talk about building at the grassroots level, that's where you truly build your fans. And that's something I love that the new ownership is doing. They're getting out. They're going to different communities. They're really engaging that fan base where at the start, it's easy to bring in fans when you win, right? 2016, they're champions in Saskatoon. 2017, they go to the final. 2018, they end up winning again. That's easy to bring in fans. But what do you do when you aren't the champions of the league? You really have to expand that fan base. And that's what I love about, what the Rush are doing now. And that's why, I'm all aboard with it. But I also think it is just, growing that game and hitting more people, because they're such a popular team where now everyone knows who the Saskatchewan Rush are. But you got to take that next step. You got to continue to grow. You got to continue to expand. You got to market it. You got to sell it. Does what makes lacrosse the game you should be checking out? Why should you come to a Saskatchewan Rush game versus watching the Saskatchewan Rough Riders or going to a Western Hockey League game? What makes it worth the drive in from North Battleford when you can stay at home and watch your local junior team, or you can come to one of the best parties in Saskatchewan and come check out a Rush game, right? Like it's all that little niche stuff that lacrosse has that nothing else does.
Oh, for sure. And in a city like Saskatoon, where we don't have an NHL team, you have the Saskatoon Blades, who are having a great year themselves, and they're somewhat of a draw. And then you also have, during the football season, the U of S Huskies. But the Rush kind of play in the winter when the football season isn't going on, and it's on different nights than the Blades, so they don't really have to compete locally in the market. And it's like you said, when they showed up, I believe they won the championship in Edmonton the year before in 2015 as well. So a really great team is your foundation to start with. And like you said, the first year they're here, they win another championship. So I would say that probably helped build the fan base right from the very start to have this successful team.
Definitely it helps, right? Winning cures all in a sense of you got started off on the right foot. But it also does help too that the fans, I think of one of the first games, I don't know if it was a preseason or if it was just the first game that they were actually there. I think there was only about 8,000 people or so in SaskTel Center. And yeah, it's a good sized crowd, but it's also not packed to the brim. And every single person was talking about it. Everyone. And again, that's the time of like Facebook's heydays, right? Like it was all over social media. You have to check out the Rush. You have to do it. And that's why it takes off, right? Word of mouth.
Yeah. Exactly. And hopefully it's just going to continue to grow from here. And look, there are some similarities between hockey and box lacrosse, but what, if any, do you think are the biggest differences between doing play-by-play for the two sports?
Hockey's got a little bit of a better flow to it, or it's a little more flow versus lacrosse, where it's almost a hybrid of hockey and basketball. You've got those, the set
scoring games, right?
Yeah, really high scoring games. Like you'll see 20 to 25 goals a game. But I guess just calling it wise, I think that the transitions can be faster from lacrosse to hockey, where you can get a stretch pass in hockey that goes 150 feet. But generally, they're going to have to corral the pass. They're going to have to get something set up. You got to make sure it's a little tougher to balance on skates. Whatever it is, it's a little slower than in lacrosse, where, you can just whip it 175 yards. You've got someone in transition off the bench, and boom, they've got 5 steps for a breakaway. It makes it that much tougher to call. But it's part of the challenge. It's part of the craft, which is why I love it, because how do you describe it to someone listening at home who's either watching on TV or they're listening? It's how can you accurately describe and depict what's going on? And for lacrosse, I think it is still a niche sport where the terminology has yet to fully evolve into, your regular fan bases. So being able to mix in a little bit of that and being able to talk through some of those situations, that's the challenging part as a broadcaster, where it is still a niche sport. The team's only been in Saskatoon for 6 years. We can't act like it's been around for 30 here. So it's definitely still a growing fan base, but that's a part of the fun as well. That's, again, I still consider myself a fan in a sense of, I was at those championships. I was loving lacrosse when the Edmonton Rush were good, when they were building back in 2012. Like that's kind of some of the stuff that got me into the game. So to be able to work in it now, that's the goal. That's the dream.
Oh, for sure. And hearing you describe the differences, to me, it sort of reminds me of the difference between calling ice hockey and ball hockey, which I've done both. And I'm actually doing the Saskatoon Ball Hockey League Fall League Championships this Saturday. So, yeah. And there are differences as well, like the floating blue line. Like once you gain the blue line, you have the whole half. There's little things like that are just different. And when you're not on skates, the game doesn't move as quick. So, I like the challenges of doing both sports as well. But I think because ice hockey is the game that I grew up with and know the best, it just feels a little more comfortable to call it.
Oh, definitely. Again, if you would have asked me 5 to 7 years ago, I probably would have said hockey's still my wheelhouse. But
yeah,
once you start working in it with the junior levels, 6-7 years ago in Edmonton area, like, you start to get adapted, you start to adjust. I think ball hockey's probably a fair comparison. I think the biggest difference as well is there's just not these, I don't know how to nonsensical stoppages. Like once you watch hockey after lacrosse, and you're like, I hate offsides, I hate icing, I hate
Yeah.
like there's so many whistles and stoppages that are just annoying. They're just nuisances. Where in lacrosse, your main stoppages are goals or penalties. They're really not stopping for much else. They keep the flow going very well. They keep the games short, condensed, tight. There's no nonsense. It really is. I mean, it's just the best sport on 2 feet in my mind.
No, you described it so well there. And since joining the Rush, do you have a favorite game or favorite moment that you've called?
Oh, favorite moment. I think it's got to be, the overtime winner last year again in Saskatoon against Colorado. Robert Church has a 5-goal game, wins it in overtime. Colorado, they end up going and winning, the league that year. But it was just such a game. It was such a back and forth effort. Eric Penny's first game in Saskatoon. That was definitely the high point of home wins last season. There was nothing more fun than that. It was SaskTel Center's rocking. You know how it is with Rush fans. Like they're as electric as it comes. And so, it's pretty much, you think of Rider fans and you stick them inside a building and make them louder. That's what Rush Nation is. So to get an overtime game that Saskatchewan wins, that was definitely the high point.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, hopefully there's going to be many more big moments for the Rush this season, and looking forward to hearing you on the call. All right, so the Edmonton Oilers picked up a big 6-3 road win of their own last night to improve their record on the season to 17-13-0. The top line of Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Zach Hyman combined for 13 points in the victory. Cody, the Oilers have had to make adjustments to their lineup due to several injuries up front. But as dominant as McDavid and Draisaitl are together, would you split them up, or should the Oilers keep them together on a regular basis this winter?
I've always been a big proponent, and anyone who's listened to, Oilers Now and stuff over summer, I think you play them together. I think you let them run. Yes, they can drive their own lines, and I think there is a time and a place for everything. But especially if you're going through struggles, which the Oilers were. Hey, this is not a 500 hockey team. This is not a team that should be floating around there. So what do you do to change the pace of things? Stack up your big line. Let your big guns go to work. They should be giving you 3 goals a game, 2 to 3 at least, with those big names of Draisaitl, McDavid, Hyman together, right? So I have no issues playing them together. What I don't like is when they struggle. And again, it felt like there was some times, even against Colorado, maybe even Calgary in the playoffs, where you just felt like they couldn't drive their own lines at times. It felt like they didn't have enough firepower to get past top defensive pairings. And that's nothing against McDavid or Draisaitl. It's not a shot at them. But I would like to see them load up that top line a little quicker. Maybe that's Jay Woodcroft, being a little hesitant to pull the trigger at first, but I have no issue in loading up that line, especially once you get the likes of Evander Kane back, right? Once you get the likes, even getting guys like McLeod and Fogle is going to help shore up your bottom 6. And so if you've got that luxury of a strong top 6, you can load up that top line, and your second line should still be able to contribute with 1 a night.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, how much fun was it to watch those two in the playoffs last year? And the crazy thing is that if Mikey Anderson didn't injure Leon Draisaitl in the first round of the playoffs, they never would have even been paired together. But because Draisaitl was playing on one leg, they couldn't have him at center. He had to be on McDavid's wing for the rest of the playoffs while he was recovering from a high ankle sprain, and he continued to play on it for over a month. I mean, it's hard to imagine how he was able to play, let alone dominate under those circumstances. But, as fun as it is to watch the two best offensive players in the league play together on the same line, I think McDavid and Draisaitl need to be centering their own lines to reach their ultimate goal of winning a Stanley Cup. And yes, they still can play together on every power play, but the Oilers are a tougher team to beat, I believe, when they have McDavid and Draisaitl driving their own lines. Now, I'm fine if they play together on occasion during the regular season, especially when they're going up against weaker opponents where McDavid and Draisaitl can just overwhelm them with their elite skill. But until Evander Kane returns to the lineup, I think you could still make a pretty strong top 6 with McDavid, Hyman, and Nugent-Hopkins on the first line, followed by Draisaitl, Yamamoto, and either Holloway or Janmark on the second line. Because when you get Ryan McLeod back, you'd want him in the third line center spot until until Kane gets back. Then you could look at possibly moving him up. But I just feel like they are a tougher team to beat when you can send McDavid and Draisaitl over the boards in waves and have the opposition have to go up against that.
Yeah, I don't really disagree. I guess it does just give me a little bit of the, second guesses if I'm, my second line is Draisaitl, Yamamoto, and Janmark. I don't feel too confident in that. Like, Yamamoto's got, one goal this season?
True.
Janmark's got one. Like, again, Draisaitl can feed you the puck all you want, but at the end of the day, if you're not putting it in the back of the net, I really don't trust you on my second line at all. And that's kind of when you look at the Oilers, lines 2 through 4, if you want to go with that, Derek Ryan leads them in scoring with 4 goals. Like that's outside of Nugent-Hopkins, pardon me. But that it's tough to say. But that's a reason why I don't want Draisaitl playing with those guys, because he's going to feed, players who aren't going to put the puck in the net. I'm sorry.
You make a good point there. And yes, the bottom 6 needs to contribute more. They have been chipping in the past week a little more than we've seen earlier this season, but you need to get more than 1 goal or 2 goals a month from your bottom 2 lines.
Exactly.
And that's been a big problem where, if McDavid and Draisaitl have an off night, which they don't have many, but when they do, it almost feels like your chances of winning that night are pretty decreased by a massive amount. And I don't know, I think that Nugent-Hopkins and Draisaitl do have good chemistry together. And I'm not trying to make excuses for Yamamoto. He does need to score more, but I believe he was playing through something earlier in the season, and then he did miss a month with an undisclosed upper body injury. So I think it's fair to say if he was healthy, he might have 5 or 6 goals by now. But yes, that's another guy who needs to get off the schneid and start putting a few more pucks in there.
And that's fine. Everyone battles injury, but he's on pace for 4 goals this season.
Yes.
If that's where we're finishing, you just gave him 3.1 schmel. That's worse than the Puljujarvi contract, and Puljujarvi's going to finish with 2 or 3 goals this year. It's not exactly lovely times in Oilerland when you talk about depth forwards.
Yamamoto is a streaky scorer, though, and I feel like there will be a stretch this year where he'll get 5 goals in 10 games, and then he might kind of go quiet again for a while. But he does other things too. I love him on the penalty kill. I think he was missed, and he does have pretty good hands with the puck, and he can kind of weave his way through the opposition in the offensive zone and set guys up. So there are skills that he brings to the table, but it's like you said, there needs to be more production from a guy who's making over $3 million a year.
He's got a worse points per game than Klim Kostin, I believe, and he's playing with much better players.
Yeah, and Klim did go on a really and I'll give Klim credit too. He went on a bit of a run there himself where he had 4 points in 5 games, including his first Gordie Howe hat trick. So that's a player who has really helped since he joined the team in I guess it would be early December late November he came up to the team.
November, yeah.
Yeah. But the next thing I wanted to just kind of talk to you about while we have McDavid and Draisaitl on mind. So McDavid had yet another 4-point performance last night, and he's now up to 26 goals and 59 points in just 30 games, which puts him on pace for 71 goals and 162 points in a full 82-game season. McDavid also recorded his 490th career assist last night, passing Glenn Anderson for 4th on the Oilers' all-time assists list. Cody, McDavid has produced offense at this clip for stretches of time before, but now that we're more than a third of the way through the season, do you think he can maintain this pace all year?
No. And the simple answer is because games get tougher as you get closer to playoffs. Everyone's going to start playing them harder after the trade deadline, and it's just not a sustainable pace because the game changes that much from November and December to March.
Mm-hmm. And I do see what you're saying there. Down the stretch, yes, the intensity will ramp up for sure. I'm not saying that he's going to average 2 points per game for the entire season, But the thing is, they do still have a more favorable schedule coming up. They've played a lot of tough teams so far. And only 2 players in the history of the game have ever put up 160 points in a season. I believe Gretzky did it 9 times and Lemieux did it 4 times. So it's unlikely he reaches that number. But to say he's going to get 70 goals as well, I mean, no one's done that in the past 30 years.
Well, where do you think he finishes at? Like, well, I mean, 120, 130?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think 120 and 130 is a lock. But even if he slows down a bit, I think he still has a real shot at 60 goals and 150 points. Now, he would need 91 points in the final 52 games to reach 150 points, but I've always believed that there would be at least one season in his career where he'd have 150 points. And if he's going to do it, it'll probably be either this year or next year when he's at the absolute height of his powers.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think about, right? Like there's so many different factors here.
Yeah, it's been a quarter of the century since someone.
Honestly, and again, right? This is going to be kind of a hot take. Like I don't think he 130. I don't think he hits 130 this year. That's still. I just think that.
But he had 123 last year, so we're only asking him to put up 7 more points than he even did a year ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it happening, but okay. Hey, I love to be proved wrong.
I mean, look. In the last, like we said, 25 years, no one's had 130 points. So you're not really going out on a limb and saying that it would be tough to accomplish. But yes, to put up 160, I think is going to be a Herculean task for him to do. And I doubt that he'll get there. But I just think he's maintained that type of pace, that 1.5 game pace that he would need or more. Over the past couple of years, we've seen him do it. And now we're asking him to maintain it for a whole 82 games. It would be tough, but I just think that even if he doesn't get to 150, he'll get close. Like I'd bet on 140 this year, just because it's almost like he gets 2 or 3 or 4 points every night. I mean, he has 24 points in his last 10 games. So it's just at what point do we say this is going to be something that he can sustain over a long period of time?
If he's going to continue to play with Draisaitl, I'll say 130 is possible. I think those two will be split up the second Evander Kane comes back. Yeah. And the point drop off is going to happen.
And for goal total, what do you think?
He's going to hit 50. That's not I don't think that's out of doubt.
Maybe he's already at 26, right?
Yeah, 55. What do you say? He's on pace for 60?
He's on pace for 71.
Oh, geez. Okay, great math. Hot start there. Well, I'll stick with 55. I don't know. I mean, again, just a different game. I hate putting too much stock into November and December hockey. That's Toronto Maple Leafs finest. But I think
we don't want to be those guys.
55 goals, 125 points. That doesn't seem outrageous.
No, and I really feel like he's going to be a 120 or more point player for the next 5 years. This is going to be that when we look back at his career, the 5 best years of his career, including last season, where he had a career high 123 points, like I said. So,
want a crazier take? I think he's going to do it for the next 10 years.
10 years.
Because the game continues to change. It's just going to get softer. It's going to get more skilled. It's going to get higher scoring. And that favors players like Connor McDavid.
Well, I talked about this on a previous podcast as well, where we tried to work out the math if he had a chance at 2,000 points in his career. And I said that if he could have 120 or more for the next 5 years, it would set him up really well in his 30s to have a shot at it. If he plays until he's 40 and was a point per game or better player the entire time, he might be able to do it. But if you're saying that he could do it for 10 years, he could even get to 2,000 quicker than that.
But again, I mean, look at the trajectory of the game. It's changing. Yeah. Hockey's changing, and it's favoring players like Connor McDavid, which it should. That's fine. I got no issues with that.
It's becoming a faster, more skilled game, and he is the most skilled, and he is the fastest. So exactly. you make a good point there. And here's the thing: even if when he's 35, he isn't the fastest player in the league anymore, I think he'll still probably be one of the top 5 fastest. I don't think he's going to completely lose his speed overnight. He might slow down a little bit because there could be some new 23-year-old kid that's, caught up to him by then. But that is a weapon that I think he'll have for the majority of his career.
Yeah, there's no arguing that.
Yeah. As for goal total, though, I think I said early in the year that I thought he would push for 60, and if he can get that total plus with, like we said, if my dream comes right and he gets 140 or more points, then that's a season for the ages. We might be looking at another unanimous MVP 2 out of 3 years.
Yeah, it should be, right? Like that's again, I don't trust voters, but yeah, you're bang on.
Well, if the 60 goal number was what won it for Matthews last year, I wonder, if that number was 57 or 58, does he come away with the Hart? But the fact that it was 60, I think that really, pushed the vote in his favor. But if Connor has the 60 this year, then that should leave no debate.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, so McDavid and Draisaitl deservingly get most of the attention in oil country, but Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is also quietly having the best season of his career. He's never had more than 69 points in a season before, but he's on pace for 93 points this year, which also matches his jersey number. Cody, what are you seeing from Nugent-Hopkins right now that's allowing him to have such a strong start?
I think he's getting this opportunity to be that guy again on a second line and to drive a little bit more. His power play, numbers have always spoke for themselves, but man, for a guy making 5.1 to be clipping along at the pace he is, I think that's impressive. And he's putting the puck in the back of the net. He's got 14 goals. He's over, 1.13 points per game. Like, he's kind of doing it all. He's not just picking up secondary assists here. Like, that was, a big knock before. Oh, he's a defensive player. He kind of floats around. He'll chip in with a couple of assists here and there. He's proven to be a legit offensive weapon here and a guy who can be super valuable playing on that power play and playing on a top unit with the best players in the world. So I think we're just seeing Nugent-Hopkins, and everyone wants to talk about everyone hits their prime at 27. Well, I don't think for Nuge, I think, he's still under 30. Like, he's not getting old by any means just because he's the longest tenured Oiler. Like, there's still time for him to continue to evolve his game. And that's what he's showing this year, is that he hasn't peaked yet. I think that's probably the best way I could put it. And so he's kind of proven everyone a little wrong.
Yeah, and I think when he first came into the league, he was a little more of an offensive-minded player. But I feel like he never got the opportunity to run free as much as, say, Taylor Hall or Jordan Eberle did. He always kind of had to be the defensive conscience on that line. And then they sort of evolved him into more of a two-way forward. And that's great because, he brings more to the table than just his offense. But I like to see that some of that creativity is coming back. He's starting to shoot the puck with more confidence. He had a tough time scoring regularly last season. Well, now he's already passed his goal total for all of last season. And yes, he's still going to pick up a bunch of assists on the power play, but I think his snapshot's really underrated, and I want to see him use it more often. The other thing I'm seeing from Nuge is that, he seems to be thinking the game like he was in, say, 2011, 2012, 2013. And yes, it's great that he's developed into a two-way player and penalty killer, but just taking a few more calculated risks offensively and using that creativity that, made him a first overall pick in the first place is kind of what got him into the league and it's what helped him succeed. I'm glad to see it coming back.
Yeah, I remember seeing him in junior and stuff with Red Deer, and he was obviously just an absolute weapon back then. But you talk about his snapshot, and I think that comes down to, yes, he's got an elite shot, but he picks his spots well. You don't see him waste too many opportunities, and that's why, he's a goal every other game this season. Like, you love that. If that's your second line guy, you'll take that any day.
And because McDavid is shooting the puck a lot on the power play as well, there's so many more shooting options. I think the other team almost used to read it on the power play that the option they were trying to go for was the one-timer to Draisaitl. And that still is their best shot on the power play, but Connor is a threat to shoot. Nuge has become a threat to shoot. So because they have to respect the shot more, it's opening up chances for other guys. So when he does feather that puck across to one of those guys, there's a better chance that they're open. But also, if those guys are covered, he feels confident taking that shot as well.
I think that's fair. Yeah, it's the value of having all those different weapons. And I think someone like Zach Hyman just, he helps bring it to that next level because he's such a versatile addition to this team. Absolutely. That, he kind of rounds out that top power play and allows for a little bit more time and space. He allows, Nugent-Hopkins to be a little bit more creative. He allows Draisaitl that second look to have an extra one-timer where in the past teams were just isoing him right away. And same with McDavid, having Zach Hyman out there makes defenders think twice about, how close their gap is going to be to which guy. And that's why you see the Oilers do have power play success.
Yeah. And I mean, shout out to Zach Hyman as well for scoring his first career hat trick last night. Just that he's another one of those guys in that $5 to $6 million range where you've got Nugent-Hopkins, Hyman, and Evander Kane. And those guys are all point per game players this year. And of course, Kane, a much smaller sample size because he got hurt in early November. But that's just tremendous value from your third, fourth, and fifth best forwards on the team.
Which is what you need, right? Guys in that $4 to $6 million range that obviously help. But where it can also hurt you is that $2 to $4 million range. And that's right now where the Oilers are seeing, when you look up and down at championship rosters and you look at Tampa Bay, Colorado, go back to St. Louis, that $4 to $6 million range, they had guys overproduce. That $2 to $4 million range, they had guys live up to expectation or play up to their full ability. And 100%, you are going to lose your Blake Colemans. You got guys like that. But for the Oilers, it's just rounding out this depth. And that's what Ken Holland has the task of doing next.
And let's hope that some prospects coming in on cheap deals will do that. I mean, I know Dylan Holloway's up here right now, and he has the potential to be a top six forward for them down the road. He's got great puck skills. He's got good speed. He's somewhat physical, big body. I mean, that's a guy who I could eventually see fitting into the top six. This year, I don't think it's quite there yet. And, you could make the case that he, would be better suited playing down with the Bakersfield Condors. But there are games that you're happy to have him. And if this team was entirely healthy, maybe he wouldn't be here. But
I make the argument the other way. If this team was fully healthy, I'd want to see Holloway on that third line.
Okay.
With the guys
and that's probably where he'd be better.
Because I don't want to see him on the third line playing with Jesse Puljujarvi. It looks like he's using a shovel out there half the time. Or James Hamlin as a center, Devin Shore, whatever. I'm not saying these guys are terrible players, but right. I don't think that they make Dylan Holloway elevate his game as much as you would hope, and that's what develops a guy, right? So if Holloway's playing with guys like Matthias Janmark, maybe Nuge goes down to center line 3 again for a bit or whatever. I don't know. I just feel like that's what Dylan Holloway needs. It's not to be playing with a bunch of AHL players on the third line.
No, and that's a good point too. I mean, we saw him dominate at the rookie tournament in Penticton. He had a great preseason as well, scoring a hat trick in a game against Vancouver. But now you come in and you're playing against regular NHL lineups night after night and going up against, some of the best defensemen in the world. And it's different than going up against AHL defenders or prospects. And it might take him a year or two to really find his step at the NHL level where he's producing on a consistent basis. But I just, I look at the body of work that he had in college hockey and just, you see the skills are there. I just think it's a matter of when it all clicks. I think he's going to be a really productive player for this team.
Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown.
Okay, so we've already sort of mentioned it, but we'll get to this now. Jesse Puljujarvi has been the subject of trade rumors for the past 3 years now, really, and those rumors have really started to pick up as of late. And the thing is, when Puljujarvi first came back to the Oilers from Finland 2 years ago, he seemed to be on the right track and looked better than he did during his first run with the club. And then last season, he started off really hot with 24 points in his first 28 games before cooling down the stretch. But This year, he only has 1 goal in 30 games, and it seems like this will probably be his last season in Edmonton. Cody, do you see a trade happening in season, or is this more likely something that's going to happen in the summer?
Who's trading for him? I mean, at this point, it's like, what do you get? Like, I remember there was talks in the offseason about like, oh, maybe they want a second rounder for him. I was always even like a third round pick. Like, yeah, that's probably about as high as you would go. Right now, is there teams lining up to give the Oilers a third round pick for Jesse Puljujärvi?
But then there's also the people who say that, well, what if he turns into the next Valeri Nichushkin with his next team?
Good. Fill your boots. It's not happening in Edmonton. It's never going to happen in Edmonton. So stop waiting and, looking into these stupid analytics that are just like, they're totally muddling people's opinions about guys, where it's just like, well, he could be useful in this role, or he could be useful in this. We're going to go through RFA status every single season with Puljujärvi, with people justifying that he's a $3+ million player.
Yeah.
And he's going to be an inefficient third liner on the Oilers. So why do you want that? He's not developing into anything else. He's just right now, he's a waste of groceries in a lot of aspects. And so get rid of him. Put someone in that position. Like we talked about the guys who are coming up from Bakersfield on entry-level deals. You can I have a hard time believing you can't find someone who would. This is a hot take. Would you rather see Brad Malone up than Jesse Puljujärvi right now? Like, I get it. Malone's not going to do a lot for you, but I think he also plays the left side. But like Puljujärvi is just, he doesn't move the needle for me at all. And the longer that you hold on to him, his value is going to diminish. And I mean, he's probably a 4th round pick after this season.
Yeah. I mean, he's a likable guy and a popular player with fans. And, I think
that's debatable. I think it's such a small group that just loves him. Like everyone's like, oh, it's a loud minority or whatever you want to call it. Like we're in the same Twitter space. I know exactly what you're coming from. We're like, there's people who will defend him to no end.
He is the Bison King. He's got that nickname. But like, I mean, like I've always cheered for the guy since the day he was drafted. I wanted it to work out here. But it seems like we've come to a point where both sides are looking to move on. And, that's unfortunate because this is a player the organization invested a 4th overall pick in. And for Puljujärvi, he can help the team in other ways. Like he does protect the puck well. He can extend plays. You'd love to see him have 5 goals or more by now instead of just 1 tip-in goal that he had about a month ago. But with Kyler Yamamoto potentially holding down 1 spot in the top 6 on the right side and Xavier Bourgault on the way, there probably isn't an opportunity for Puljujärvi to ever be elevated in the lineup to where he'd like to be. And the thing is, you've got other guys like Ryan McLeod who needs a new contract next offseason, Evan Bouchard. So the money that he's making, you probably want to allocate to those guys anyway. But the thing is, I just don't want to see him traded for another team's reclamation project. I would prefer if the Oilers could package him in a deal to bring in a bigger piece. Like if the Oilers want to trade for Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews in Chicago, they're probably going to need to send out some money the other way to make them fit under the cap. So maybe the Oilers could find a deal that includes Puljujärvi as well as a high draft pick and a prospect to bring in one of those two, or another marquee rental at the deadline.
Does that really help your draft pick value? Like if you package a first and Puljujärvi, it almost feels like it diminishes that first rounder in a sense. If I get it, you're trying to dish out money.
Well, that's it. Like I don't know how much the
But then just get rid of Jesse Puljujärvi for a 4th rounder and flip that first for, somewhat of value, as you said.
Well, you can do it that way too, or maybe you try and get Arizona involved or another team as to make a 3-way deal here. But basically what I'm saying is if he does, well, if you're bringing in a $10 million player like those guys, even if it is on the final year of their deal, you're going to have to need some salary retention from the Blackhawks. Plus you need to send out a contract. I just think that, if he had to be the one to go, then at least you're getting the $3 million off the books to fit in a guy who is immediately going to play in your top 6, like a Patrick Kane, or be your 3rd line center in Jonathan Toews. And now you're much stronger up front. So I just
totally fair.
I just see if he's going to be the one to go, whether it's in 2 separate deals or just one deal, that's where they're probably going to be looking to clear money, I would think.
Yeah, that sense makes, definitely you're going to have to move some money if you want to bring in a big name.
Do you see any other imminent moves, or do you think that it's going to be more Ken Holland will go through his usual routine of bringing in one or two guys at the deadline?
Well, I would be shocked if Warren Fogel's a part of this team, past the deadline. I feel like that's an obvious, you get a chance to shed $3 million, and you're probably going to have to package in a pick or a prospect. But it's a salary cap world right now. And if the Oilers do want to add and make a run for it, you kind of got to get rid of that dead weight. And that's Warren Foegele right now. Like, he's not that effective of a third line player for you. So do you want a $3 million guy on your fourth line? Probably not, because if you don't have him there and he's out of your lineup or he's off your tab, you can have a better top six. So I can see them packaging and get rid of him.
Yeah. And I mean, they do have a lot of high earning players. So you want to have as many cheap contracts on the team as you can. And who knows, maybe Puljujarvi and Foegele both go. I'm not trying to run them out of town or anything, but it's like you're saying, these are the type of moves that they'd have to make if they're going to try to fit in one, if not multiple additions at the deadline. Like, I'd love to see them bring in a defenseman and a forward, ideally. So, I mean, if Patrick Kane's coming in, just as I'll throw it out there, that's 50% retention plus, sending out money. Well, now what if you want to try and go for Jacob Chychrun? And, that's another one that always gets talked about by Oilers fans. I'll just ask you while we're on it, this rumor's been going on forever, it seems like. Do you think there's any smoke there, or do you see Chychrun as just kind of like a pipe dream?
Well, some people want to say where there's smoke, there's fire, but I also think you should check that smoke and make sure it's not just dust. And so that's where I think for the Oilers, you can kick around as much as you want. End of the day, I don't think they can offer a package better than other teams. So I have a hard time believing Arizona is going to be fine handing him off to Ken Holland when I have to believe that there's other teams able to put a better package together than Edmonton can.
Yeah, and the rumors are that they want 2 first-round picks, a second, and a good prospect. I mean, I know the Oilers need help on defense, but that seems like a big ask to get a second-pairing defenseman.
But that could almost make sense for a team who is making that last second or last effort push. Like, if a team like Pittsburgh is sitting good come playoff time and they're like, hey, are we going to go for one more run with Crosby and Malkin? Right. It's going to mean that we're going to be, dust for the next 5 years, whatever. Like, that would make sense then to mortgage the farm for that and being like, we're going for one more run. I don't care what it costs. Sorry, guys. Sorry, fans. It's going to suck, but we're going to have a great playoffs here.
And, that's the ultimate goal, too. And if you bring in a Stanley Cup, I think it's a lot easier to stomach 5+ years of being a bottom feeder if you have that championship in your pocket.
Well, ask LA.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to stomach for them.
And I mean, that's the goal for the Oilers, too. Like, in this next window, like, McDavid is under contract for 4 more years, including this year. Draisaitl's under contract for 3 more years. I'm still always believing that they're going to re-sign here, but Draisaitl's next contract, how much is it? What if for one, like
$12 million?
Okay, I want that. I said it at least that, but what if it's even 13? What if there's that 1 year where he makes more than Connor, and then the next year Connor gets his big deal? So I just kind of see something like that potentially happening, and hopefully the salary cap is $90 million by that point as well. But still, when you're taking on even bigger contracts, you're going to need some cheap ones too. And so, like, if you're trying to fit in a Chychrun under this and giving away a bunch of assets, it'd be pretty tough.
You would almost have to find a way for them to take Barry. And what's Barry got this year and another one? I think at like 4.5. So again, you could make the numbers work. I'm just saying, I think if he is actually in play, the Oilers aren't going to put together a better package than probably half a dozen other teams.
How much value do you put in the guys that are tight with the core? Like, I mean, Tyson Barrie seems to be pretty tight with McDavid and those guys. Like, I know putting together a winning team and the best team possible is the most important thing. But does subtracting someone from the room who is really good with your core group and still does produce. Like, let's not say Tyson Barrie isn't an offensive defenseman. I know he has his
leads the
defensive
team in points for a defenseman,
but has his defensive deficiencies. Just how much stock do you put into taking someone out of the dressing room that's a popular teammate?
Well, I think you got to put a lot of stock into it, but also none of us are in the room on a daily basis. No one in media is. So
right.
that's just it's a good question, something you got to consider, but it's also not something any of us can answer. It's only something that the coach, that the star players can really decide how much of an impact that relationship has.
Yeah, and I know that Darnell Nurse is a lightning rod for criticism in Edmonton too, and every time he makes a poor play with the puck or a giveaway, he just gets lit up on Twitter, and his salary, or his $9.25 million salary gets brought up. But it's just, I think he is still the Oilers' best defenseman, in my opinion. I know some people say, oh, Cece's having this great year and everything too, but in terms of their best overall defenseman, Darnell Nurse is on pace for 45 points this year. He leads the team with a plus 13 rating. Yes, does he sometimes make a bad pass, or does he give away the puck? Sure. But I think that until they have a better defenseman than Darnell Nurse, how can they get rid of him? I mean, where would the left side be without him if he went down with an injury?
No, he's the best defender on the team. Yes. Again, it's the same idiots that are trying to justify stupid takes that are the ones that are being like, Darnell Nurse is terrible. What were you going to do? Not pay him? He got $9 million on 31 other teams. I
mean, sure. Did the Oilers kick the can down the road a few too many times bridging him? Yes, they did. And should they have locked him up to a $7 million deal 2 years earlier? That probably would have been more ideal. I think if Darnell Nurse is playing at $7 million instead of $9+, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, but no one expected him to go and have a career year offensively, right? No. Like, you can't predict that. You can't just look in hindsight and be like, well, if we would have just given him an 8-year deal, 3 years ago, he would have been set. Well, no kidding. Then everyone would be the best GM in the world. There's so many delusional fans out there being like, well, for that money, we could have these guys and stuff. Like, that's not how being an NHL GM works. That's how playing stupid video games works, not real life.
And let's not forget that through no fault of their own, the Oilers lost their top pairing. Oscar Klefbom had a career-ending injury, and unfortunately, he was done in the NHL at age 27. And Adam Larsson was lost in the expansion draft. It's just losing those two guys forced the Oilers to really fill in some pretty significant gaps on the back end the best they could. And I know people will still criticize Ken Holland for the job he's done, but if he still had those two pieces, I think that this blue line's looking a lot better.
Definitely. But then again, it's still hindsight. It's like, well, if you do have those two pieces, who are you going to lose? You're going to lose Cece, Barrie. Again, it's such a, it would be awesome to have them if they're going to be healthy and in their prime, but you've got to subtract now $8-9 million off that roster somewhere.
And it's just like when Holland signed Cassian to that 4-year extension. I mean, should he have waited to the offseason to sign him? Probably. I think that would have been ideal. But let's not forget that was 2 months before COVID hit. So how could Ken Holland foresee that a global pandemic was going to hit and that the salary cap wasn't going to move up when it was projected to have a pretty significant jump that offseason? So there's all these things that kind of factored in and forced the Oilers management group to make decisions on the fly because they thought they were going to have more cap space than they did. And just to kind of tie into my point about Nurse, that's another guy who is really tight with the group. I mean, as far as we can tell, he's best friends with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And I think the chance of Darnell Nurse playing here for the next 8 years increases the chances of McDavid and Draisaitl being here for the next 8 years as well.
1,000%. And that's all the stuff inside the room that we don't have firsthand knowledge of. We can guess, we can assume things, not always going to be right. But I do think that there's a lot of stock made in what does the core want, and what they want, they get.
Right. And I will just say, I know this has to do with nothing on the ice, but I met Darnell Nurse at a Blue Jays game 5 years ago, and we had about a 10-minute conversation, and I can tell you, nicest guy in the world. He was asking me questions about myself. how many interactions do you have with a professional athlete where it's not like the fan just kind of asking him a bunch of stuff, but he's actually conversing with you and like getting to know me as well, which I never even expect but I'll just say one of the nicest guys I've ever met.
And that's awesome. And again, there's a lot of those stories with people who do really like Darnell Nurse's presence, and he does a lot of good around the Edmonton area as well. So it's not really a surprise, but there's also, again, it's that loud minority who is the ones trying to run him out of town because of the deal he was offered.
Exactly. And who's going to turn down the money that they were offered him? It's almost like he should have said, no, I'll take less.
Yeah, that's not how the NHL works.
Yeah. Now, Connor McDavid did leave reportedly $2.5 million on the table when he signed his $12.5 million deal. But I mean, that's a different story. I mean, he's in a different stratosphere than everyone else in terms of earning potential. So I think with all the commercials and knowing that there's probably another $100 million contract waiting for him after he finishes this one, that he was all right to leave the GM a couple million extra to work with.
Yeah, I think he'll do all right for himself. And, anything that he probably passes up on in real salary, I'm sure Dale Cates and company can get him a couple of nice endorsement deals to fill his fridge.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, I just want to wrap up the show today by just talking about some news that broke the other day. So Edmonton City Council voted in favor of demolishing Northlands Coliseum on Monday. And even though the Oilers haven't played there in 7 years, I still think some Oilers fans will be sad to see it go. I mean, it was a building the Oilers won 4 Stanley Cups in and set countless NHL records in the process. So I'm just wondering, do you have a favorite memory from Northlands Coliseum?
It was my first Oilers game, and it was in Edmonton, and it was Battle of Alberta. Okay. Now, I really hope no one's fact-checking me here, but I do think that it was a 4 or 5-0. I believe Yoni Ordio was the goaltender for Calgary who pitched the shutout. And I mean, this was like, what are we talking, 2013?
Okay.
Maybe 2014-ish, around then. I don't know. I'm so bad with years and stuff like that. Like, this is still 10 years ago or so. And That's all I remember. It was my first time in Rexall, first time in the old barn, Battle of Alberta, all this hype. And the Calgary Flames just laid an absolute pumping on the Edmonton Oilers.
Well, I mean, that was a tough era of Oilers hockey. And I was a university student in Calgary at that time. So I know what it was like to be an Oilers fan in enemy territory during the decade of darkness. But I mean, my first time at Northlands Coliseum, then Rexall Place, was I remember it was also against the Flames, and it was April 1st, 2006. So they lost 4-1 that night, but thankfully that season ended on a little better note than the Flames did.
That is true. Hey, you can hang your hat on that for sure.
And I did go to one other Battle of Alberta in my life, and that was actually the last game of the 2018-19 season. And that is a very memorable game for 2 reasons. I got to see Leon Draisaitl score his 50th goal of the season live. So for a short period of time, I was extremely excited. And then that excitement all went away when Connor McDavid suffered a torn MCL when he crashed into the post. So it's a bittersweet night for myself, because I have one great memory and one terrible memory from that night.
People have just glazed over that McDavid injury. Like, you remember seeing the documentary on it?
I do. In 2019,
that was actually
it was
so wild. And it was unbelievably done. But people have just glazed over it still. Like, if you were to bring that back now, I think it breaks the internet again. But people have just forgotten about it.
Yes, I thought he should have won the Masterton that year. And I didn't want to take anything away from a player who had cancer and came back to the NHL, or a player who was recovering from a personal issue that was going on in their life and they were able to resume their career. But I just thought, for what that guy did, to reject having a surgery that would have kept him out of action for 10 months and say, I'm going to take a shot and rehab it. And the doctors told him, there's not 100% chance that this is going to work. Like, you may try to rehab it and it doesn't go properly and we still have to do the surgery after that, in which case you're missing an entire season. And he rolled the dice and said, okay, I'm going to rehab it for 6 months on my own, and did not miss a single game from that injury. He was back for the season opener against the Vancouver Canucks in 2019-20.
Oh, it's nuts. It's one thing that everyone forgets about. And it's fun to bring it back up.
And then he had 97 points in 64 games before the season was cut short due to the pandemic that year. I mean, to come back and finish second in the league in scoring behind only Leon Draisaitl after that type of an injury, I just thought, I mean, potentially career-altering injury, comes back to the league, finishes top 2 in the league in scoring. That probably should win you a Masterton.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's losing too much sleep over a Masterton. No. I don't think too many people are, but I can see the argument being made.
Exactly. He'll live with his 4 Art Rosses, soon to be 5, 2 Harts, 3 Lindsays, which he'll add one of each to those to his trophy case this year, and a first Rocket Richard, I think. By the way, I didn't ask that, but you think he's winning the Rocket, right?
Yeah. There's no way he doesn't.
I just feel like players of his ilk, they. Like, yes, I'm sure he loves the 4 Art Rosses he has, but I think the guys like him look at the Rocket and say, yeah, I want that one too.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone looks at it and says, yeah, that would be nice, but at the end of the day, I think if you ask McDavid what he's worried about, it's just, how am I going to get a cup? How are we going to win a Stanley Cup? How are we going to get over the hump? Like, yes, personal accolades are awesome, but these guys are so dialed in. They're the best of the best for a reason, and they are zoned in on one thing and one thing only.
Without a doubt. I mean, he's so driven to win. I don't know if there's a player with a more intense internal drive to succeed in the NHL than him, and that's just going from, surface level what we see, but you can just tell that he has that intensity and drive to win, at least like no one else on the Oilers. And come playoff time, look what we saw last year.
Exactly. Yeah,
and I'm hoping. Sorry, go ahead.
No, there's nothing like him. Like, that's when he wants to change a game. Boom. And I guess now the real question comes: did they learn from that loss to Colorado?
Yeah.
Or is that really this team's ceiling?
Well, when this team gets healthy, and if they're able to make 1 or 2 meaningful additions, then I think they're going to be ready to roll for the playoffs. And I'll just add in, if there's one individual trophy that I think he wants the most this year, it's the Conn Smythe, because that probably accompanies the Stanley Cup.
That's fair.
Awesome. Well, listen, Cody, I really appreciate you being on the show today. It was fun talking to you, and I hope you'll be back again sometime.
Always a pleasure, Eric.
And I'm sure most people listening to this podcast already follow you on Twitter, but if they don't, where can they find you?
At Janner on PXP.
Okay, so everybody please go follow Cody. Cody, good luck for the rest of the Rush season, and we'll talk to you again sometime.
Take care.
Thanks, man. So for Cody Janzen, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.